The grand chamber of the Galactic Council stretched so far that the walls disappeared into a soft blue haze. Ambassador Sarah Chun stood at the center of the massive room, a single human among thousands of alien beings. Some had scales, some had fur, and some looked like they were made of living crystal. They all stared at her with their various eyes, and none of them looked friendly. High Arbiter Krell clicked his mandibles together, making a sound like two swords scraping. He was twice as tall as Sarah, with a body covered in black armor plates and forearms that ended in sharp claws. Behind him, the representatives of 846 species waited in their floating seats, arranged in circles that rose up like the inside of a giant bowl. "Ambassador Chun," Krell said, his voice translated into English by the device in her ear. "We have called you here because your species refuses to follow the most sacred law of our civilization. For 3,000 years, every member of this council has placed their military forces under unified command. This is not a request. This is the foundation of galactic peace." Sarah kept her face calm, even though her heart was pounding. She had known this meeting would come eventually. Humanity had been part of the galactic community for only 50 years, but already the other species were growing impatient with human stubbornness. "High Arbiter," she said, her voice steady, "we understand the importance of the Grand Coalition. But humanity has a different history than most species here. We've learned that unified command structures don't always work the way they should." A rippling sound moved through the chamber. It was alien laughter, coming from hundreds of different mouths and throat sacs and vibrating membranes. Sarah felt her cheeks grow hot, but she didn't look away from Krell. "You are children in galactic terms," said Ambassador Vexter, a being that looked like a floating jellyfish made of purple gas. "Your whole civilization is barely older than my own lifetime. You think your small wars on one planet have taught you more than 3,000 years of galactic history?" "Our wars weren't small," Sarah said quietly. "Not to us. And we learned something important from them. When you put all your forces under one command, you create a single point of failure. Politics gets in the way. Different leaders argue about strategy. Orders take too long to reach the front lines. Soldiers die while generals debate." Krell leaned forward, his massive form casting a shadow over Sarah. "And yet your chaos and independence would create something worse. A military without unified command is a mob, not an army. It cannot coordinate. It cannot plan. It cannot win against organized opposition." "Maybe," Sarah said. "Or maybe it can win in ways an organized army never could." The chamber fell silent. Sarah could feel the weight of all those alien eyes on her. She knew what they were thinking. Humans were arrogant. Humans were foolish. Humans didn't understand how the galaxy worked. "The vote will now commence," Krell announced. "All species in favor of giving humanity 30 standard days to integrate their military forces into coalition command, or face expulsion from galactic civilization and potential military enforcement. Indicate now." Lights began to glow throughout the chamber. Green lights, hundreds of them, thousands of them. Sarah watched as every single species voted yes, even the ones that had seemed friendly to humanity. Even the ones that traded heavily with human worlds. Fear of breaking tradition was stronger than any friendship. "The vote is complete," Krell said. 846 species in favor. 1 opposed. "Ambassador Chun, you have 30 days. If you do not comply, all trade with human space will cease. All embassies will be closed. All technology sharing will end. And if your species attempts to maintain an independent military by force, the full power of the coalition will respond. Do you understand?" Sarah nodded slowly. "I understand. Do you have anything else to say?" Sarah looked around the chamber one more time. She thought about all the human ships scattered across their small corner of space. She thought about all the human soldiers and pilots and commanders, each one trained to think for themselves, to adapt, to survive. She thought about what these aliens were about to learn. Just one thing, she said. You've spent 3,000 years fighting as a unified force. You've won battles against pirates and raiders and the occasional rebel species. You've maintained peace because everyone was too afraid to fight you. But you've never fought us. You've never seen what humans can do when we're pushed into a corner. You've never seen how we fight when everything is on the line. Is that a threat? Krell asked, his voice sharp. It's a fact, Sarah said. You're making a mistake. You think unity is strength. You think putting all your forces under one command makes you powerful. Maybe it does, against an enemy that fights the same way. But we don't fight that way. We never have. And if you force us into a war, you're going to learn why that matters. Krell's mandibles clicked together again, faster this time. We have 3 million warships, Ambassador. How many do you have? Enough, Sarah said. Then we shall see, Krell replied. 30 days. The timer begins now. Sarah bowed slightly, the way human diplomats did, and turned to leave. Her footsteps echoed in the huge chamber as she walked toward the exit. Behind her, she could hear the aliens talking, their voices mixing together into a sound like rushing water. They were confident. They were certain. They thought they knew how this would end. Sarah stepped through the door and let herself smile, just a little. They had no idea what was coming. They had fought against unified enemies for 3,000 years. They had never fought against an enemy that didn't need unity to win. The galaxy was about to learn a very old human truth. Sometimes the pack of wolves beats the lion. Not despite their independence, but because of it. The coalition assembled its forces slowly, like a massive beast waking from sleep. From 846 different species, warships began to gather in the neutral space between territories. They came in every shape imaginable. The Krellian battlespheres looked like small moons covered in weapons. The Tar Collective sent ships that could shift between dimensions, appearing and disappearing like ghosts. The Vex Sovereignty brought their dreadnoughts, each one the size of a city and capable of cracking a planet's crust. Admiral Vexter watched the gathering fleet from his command ship and felt satisfaction pulse through his gaseous form. Never in recorded history had so many species worked together. The combined fleet, as it was officially called, numbered over 3 million vessels. The coordination alone was a masterpiece of organization. Supply lines stretched across dozens of star systems. Communication networks connected hundreds of different language groups. Formation patterns had to account for thousands of different ship types and propulsion systems. It took almost a full 30 days just to get everyone in position. During those 30 days, human space went quiet. Trading posts that humans operated were abandoned overnight. Diplomatic missions closed their doors. Human merchants vanished from alien markets. Long-range sensors showed human ships retreating toward their core systems, pulling back like a tide going out before a storm. They're afraid, said Subcommander Threx, a reptilian officer who served as Vexter's tactical advisor. Look at the pattern. They're fortifying Earth and Mars and their main colonies. Classic defensive positioning. They know they can't win, so they're preparing to protect what matters most. Vexter studied the tactical display. Threx was right. The human formations around their home worlds looked exactly like siege preparations. Orbital defense platforms being activated. Minefields being deployed. Fighter squadrons pulling back to protect major population centers. How long do you estimate the siege will take? Vexter asked. 2 weeks, maybe 3. The humans have decent technology, but they're outnumbered 3,000 to 1. Once we establish a blockade and start systematic bombardment of military targets, they'll surrender to save their civilians. Vexter wasn't so sure. He had studied the human military for years, ever since they joined the Council. Something about them bothered him. Their doctrine was strange, focused on small unit tactics and individual initiative rather than mass coordination. Their training emphasized adaptability over obedience. Every human officer seemed to have the authority to make major decisions without consulting higher command. It was chaos. It shouldn't work. And yet human forces had been remarkably effective in the small conflicts they'd been involved in, mostly putting down pirate operations in their local space. Send a message to all fleet commanders, Vexter ordered. We move on Earth in 3 days. All forces are to maintain formation discipline. No independent action without authorization from Central Command. Is that understood? Perfectly, Admiral, Trex replied. What Vexter didn't see, what none of the coalition forces saw, were the human ships that weren't pulling back to defend Earth. While sensors watched the obvious defensive preparations around human homeworlds, other vessels slipped away quietly through rarely used wormholes and jump points. Freighters that were actually modified warships. Science vessels that carried enough firepower to fight a small fleet. Even a few apparent civilian transports that had military-grade engines and weapons hidden in their cargo holds. Captain Maria Rodriguez sat in the commander's chair of the destroyer Relentless and watched her navigation display. Her ship was 12 light-years from Earth now, hiding in the debris field of an ancient supernova where sensors couldn't easily track them. Around her, the bridge crew worked quietly, checking systems and running simulations. Orders confirmed, Captain, said her communications officer. We're designated Hunter Pack 7. Target list includes Coalition Fuel Depot Gamma 41, supply convoy routes through the Vex sector, and any targets of opportunity we identify. Maria nodded. Rules of engagement? Full discretion to the commander. We're authorized to attack any military target. Avoid civilian casualties when possible, but mission success is the priority. No communication with Earth or any other human ship unless absolutely necessary. We operate independently until recalled. And how do we know when to come home? Asked Lieutenant Chun, her tactical officer. When the war is over, Maria said simply. One way or another. This was repeated in 200 other human ships scattered across a vast area of space. Each captain received their orders. Each crew understood the mission. And each vessel set course for different targets. Moving quietly through space like sharks circling their prey, the Coalition's 3 million ships were gathering in one place, following detailed coordination plans, waiting for orders from Central Command. The human forces were splitting up, giving each commander complete authority, trusting them to find their own battles. 2 different philosophies of war. 2 different ideas about how military forces should operate. Soon, the galaxy would learn which one worked better. On the 3rd day after the deadline passed, Admiral Vexter gave the order. The combined fleet moved toward Earth, maintaining perfect formation. Ships that were designed to operate independently now followed strict positioning requirements. Captains who were used to making their own decisions now waited for instructions from the chain of command. It was the largest military force ever assembled. It was perfectly organized. It was completely unified under Central Command. And it was the biggest target humanity had ever been given. As the Coalition fleet entered the outer edges of the Sol system, Captain Rodriguez and 200 other human commanders received a simple message from Earth. Weapons free. Happy hunting. The war had begun. Admiral Vexter's command ship entered the Sol system with appropriate caution. His fleet spread out in a formation that had been practiced for weeks, each group of ships taking their assigned position. Sensors swept ahead, looking for mines or hidden weapon platforms. The human defensive formations appeared on his displays, exactly where intelligence had predicted they would be. "Open a channel," Vexter ordered. Final demand for surrender. The communication went out, transmitted on all frequencies. It promised that humanity could still avoid destruction if they immediately agreed to integrate their forces into coalition command. It guaranteed that only military targets would be engaged if fighting became necessary. It gave them 30 minutes to respond. 20-8 minutes later, there was still no answer from Earth. "Sir," said Subcommander Threx, "we're receiving priority emergency transmissions from Coalition space. Multiple systems reporting attacks." Vexter felt his gaseous form ripple with confusion. "Attacks? What kind of attacks?" "Gamma 41 fuel depot is gone, sir. Completely destroyed." A human destroyer appeared without warning, destroyed the entire facility, and vanished before defensive forces could respond. Threx's scales had turned pale. And there are more reports coming in. Krellian homeworld's orbital shipyards have been hit. Not the planet itself, just the military construction facilities. 3 different supply convoys report being ambushed. Communication relay stations in the Tar sector are offline. "How many attackers?" Vexter demanded. "Best estimates are showing 1 or 2 human ships per target." "Sir, there are reports coming in from dozens of locations, all across Coalition space. All simultaneous attacks." Vexter stared at the tactical display in disbelief. This wasn't possible. The human fleet was supposed to be concentrated around Earth. The intelligence reports, the sensor data, everything pointed to a defensive strategy. But now human ships were appearing across Coalition territory like a swarm of insects, hitting targets that were hundreds of light years apart. How did they coordinate this? Threx asked, voicing the question everyone was thinking. The answer came as more reports flooded in. Within 6 hours of the Coalition fleet entering Sol System, 200 human vessels had struck at 300 different targets. They weren't coordinating because they didn't need to. Each captain had chosen their own objectives, adapted to local conditions, and executed independent attacks without waiting for orders or confirmation. "Sir, we're receiving demands from member species," Threx said, his voice strained. "The Krellian Imperium wants us to send ships to defend their homeworld. The Tar Collective is demanding protection for their territory. The Vex Sovereignty says their supply lines are being cut and they need immediate reinforcement." Vexter felt the careful plans he had spent weeks creating begin to fall apart. Tell them to deploy their own defensive forces. They're requesting authorization from Central Command to break formation and return to their territories. "Denied," Vexter said firmly. "We maintain fleet cohesion. That's the entire point of unified command. We don't scatter our forces just because the enemy is attempting harassment tactics." But as the hours passed, the reports grew worse. A human carrier group had somehow penetrated deep into Krellian space and destroyed half of their reserve fleet before vanishing. Human raiders were hitting resource extraction operations, causing economic damage that would take years to repair. Every time Coalition forces responded to a human attack, they found nothing but debris and empty space. The problem was becoming clear. The Coalition's command structure required every decision to flow through proper channels. A local commander couldn't pursue a human ship without authorization. Ships couldn't break formation without approval from Fleet Command. When member species requested protection, there had to be meetings and debates about resource allocation. The humans didn't have any of these limitations. Each human captain made their own decisions instantly. When they saw an opportunity, they took it. When they needed to retreat, they did so without waiting for permission. They adapted to changing situations faster than the Coalition's bureaucracy could even process what was happening. "Sir, The Tar Collective is withdrawing from the fleet, Threx reported, his voice hollow. They're taking their ships back to defend their own territory. They say they can't wait for authorization any longer. That violates fleet discipline, Vexter said. But even as he spoke, he knew it didn't matter. The unity of command was breaking down. Other species would follow the Tar example. The magnificent combined fleet was starting to disintegrate. Captain Rodriguez guided the Relentless through a jump point and back into normal space. Behind her, the Coalition fuel depot she had just destroyed was expanding into a cloud of superheated gas. Her crew was already plotting their next target, 3 systems away. Captain, we're picking up Coalition patrol ships on intercept course, her tactical officer reported. How many? 12. Mixed species composition. They're maintaining formation and broadcasting requests for our surrender. Maria smiled. 12 ships in perfect formation, following tactical doctrine, probably waiting for orders on how to engage. Split formation. Anderson, you take Team 1 and Vector left. I'll take Team 2 right. We'll hit them from both flanks simultaneously. Don't wait for my signal, just attack when you have a good firing solution. Her crew moved without hesitation. The Relentless broke into 2 groups, each one maneuvering independently. By the time the Coalition patrol realized what was happening, they were caught between 2 attacking forces, each one adapting to the situation without needing to communicate or coordinate. The fight lasted 8 minutes. The Coalition ships tried to maintain formation, tried to follow their tactical doctrine, tried to wait for coordinated responses. But the human forces didn't fight as a unit. They fought as individuals who understood the same goal, each one exploiting whatever weakness they saw, each one making split-second decisions without consulting anyone else. When it was over, 6 Coalition ships were crippled, and the rest were retreating in disorder. The Relentless had minor damage that her engineering team was already repairing. They would be ready for the next attack within hours. Captain, her communications officer said, we're picking up transmissions from other human ships in the region. Looks like Hunter Pack 3 and Hunter Pack 11 are both operating within 10 light-years of our position. Contact them, Maria ordered. See if they want to coordinate on a larger target. But make it clear we're not waiting for group consensus. Any ship that wants to join the attack shows up at the designated coordinates. Anyone who doesn't is free to pursue their own objectives. This was happening across Coalition space. Human ships that had never met before found each other, coordinated loose attacks without formal command structures, and then scattered again to hunt independently. It was chaos by Coalition standards. But it was chaos that won battles. Back in Sol System, Admiral Vexter received the reports and finally understood the terrible truth. The Coalition had created a magnificent military machine, unified and coordinated and powerful. But they had created a single target, a command structure that could be overwhelmed and paralyzed. Humanity had created something else entirely. 200 ships operating independently had done more damage in 3 months than most wars caused in years. And Vexter had just realized something even worse. The humans at Earth hadn't moved. The defensive forces around humanity's homeworlds were still in position, untouched, waiting. These weren't the human military. These were just the raiders. The real fleet was still out there, hidden, uncommitted. Vexter gave the order he never thought he would have to give. All ships, begin withdrawal from Sol System. We're returning to defend Coalition territory. The combined fleet turned around and limped home, having never fired a single shot at Earth. Part 4 High Arbiter. Krell sat in the emergency session of the Council and tried to understand how everything had gone so wrong. Around him, representatives from 846 species argued and shouted and demanded action. The beautiful chamber that usually maintained such dignity now echoed with anger and fear. 3 months. That's all it had taken for the war to turn into a disaster. Coalition territory was in chaos. Trade routes were disrupted. Supply lines were cut. Military installations across dozens of species were damaged or destroyed. And the magnificent combined fleet that was supposed to overwhelm humanity through sheer numbers had accomplished nothing except wasting resources, while human raiders tore apart the infrastructure that supported it. Order! Krell clicked his mandibles together hard enough to make a sound like a gunshot. We must maintain discipline. But discipline was exactly what the Coalition was losing. Individual species had started recalling their ships to protect their own territories. The grand strategy of unified command was falling apart as political disputes erupted over who deserved protection and who should sacrifice for the common good. The Krellian Imperium refused to accept non-Krellian commanders. The Tar Collective insisted their phase technology made them best suited for hunting human raiders, but other species didn't trust them to share intelligence. The Vex sovereignty demanded that the fleet protect their shipyards first, since they were building the most vessels. 3,000 years of peace and cooperation were unraveling, because the Coalition had never actually been tested by a real threat. They had maintained order through intimidation and tradition, but they had never fought an enemy that refused to play by accepted rules. "We need to discuss peace terms," said Ambassador Threx quietly. The chamber went silent. For a moment, Krell thought his translator had malfunctioned. Peace terms? With the humans? After only 3 months? "We outnumber them thousands to 1, Krell protested. "And yet we're losing," Threx replied. Admiral Vex Theres' report was very clear. "Every time we try to corner human raiders, they escape. Every time we establish a defensive position, they hit somewhere else. Our command structure is too slow to respond to their tactics. And while we've been focused on the raiders, we haven't even engaged their main fleet yet." "Their main fleet?" Krell leaned forward. "What main fleet?" "Intelligence suggests they only have a few hundred capital ships." "That intelligence was wrong," Threx said flatly. "We've confirmed visual contact with over 200 human vessels actively raiding our space. But when we attempted to track their origin points, we found nothing. They're not operating from known human bases, which means humanity has hidden shipyards and fleet anchorages that we know nothing about. The ships at Earth, the ones we thought were their full defensive force, those never moved. Those never even participated in the fighting. The raiders are something else entirely." Krell felt a chill run through his exoskeleton. "How many ships do they really have?" "We don't know," Threx admitted. But Ambassador Chun offered to discuss terms. "I think we should listen to what she has to say." The vote was closer than it should have been, but eventually the council agreed. They had no choice. The alternative was watching their civilization slowly bleed out while human raiders struck targets faster than the Coalition could respond to them. Ambassador Sarah Chun arrived at the council station alone, just as she had 3 months earlier. But this time, no one laughed at her. No one made comments about humanity's youth and inexperience. The aliens watched her walk to the center of the chamber with something that looked like fear in their various eyes. Krell didn't waste time with formalities. "What are your terms, Ambassador?" "Simple," Sarah said. "Humanity remains independent. We keep our military forces under our own command. In exchange, the raids stop and we return to peaceful coexistence." "That's all?" Krell asked suspiciously. "No territory demands? No reparations? No requirement that we reduce our own forces?" "That's all," Sarah confirmed. "We never wanted to fight you. We just wanted to be left alone to run our military the way we think best." "Why?" Krell demanded. "Why does this matter so much to your species? Why couldn't you simply accept the same system that has worked for everyone else?" Sarah looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of as many representatives as she could. When she spoke, her voice was clear and calm. "Because we learned something in our history that you never had to learn," she said. "You've spent 3,000 years fighting as a unified force. You developed perfect coordination and beautiful formations and complex command structures. But you've only fought against enemies that worked the same way. Pirates who had simple hierarchies. Raiders with basic organization. Rebel species that tried to mimic coalition tactics." She pulled up a holographic display showing coalition territory marked with hundreds of red dots, each one a location where human forces had struck. "You created a single command structure, which meant we only had to paralyze one decision-making system to disrupt your entire war effort. You practiced complex formations, which meant you were predictable. You required authorization for every action, which meant you were slow. You built your whole military philosophy around the idea that unity is strength." Sarah zoomed the display out, showing the full scope of the raids. "We learned something different. We learned that sometimes independence is strength. That sometimes the pack of wolves beats the lion not because each wolf is stronger, but because the lion doesn't know which way to turn. You tried to fight 200 ships as if they were a single fleet. But they weren't. They were 200 independent commanders making 200 different decisions, adapting to 200 different situations, without needing to ask permission or wait for consensus. Chaos," Ambassador Vexter said quietly. "You weaponize chaos." "We weaponize trust," Sarah corrected. "We trained every captain to think independently and then trusted them to make good decisions. We gave them objectives and set them loose to accomplish those objectives however they saw fit. Your admirals spent weeks planning perfect strategies. Our captains spent minutes adapting to whatever they found. And adaptation beats planning when the situation keeps changing." Krell clicked his mandibles slowly, a gesture of deep thought. "You said you haven't committed your main fleet. How many ships do you actually have?" Sarah smiled, and there was something fierce in that smile. "The raiders numbered about 200 vessels. They did all of this with 200 ships operating independently. Now ask yourself what 12,000 ships could do if we were actually trying to conquer territory instead of just making a point." The silence in the chamber was absolute. Every being present understood the implication. The coalition had struggled to defend against 200 raiders. If humanity actually committed their full military force, operating with the same independent philosophy, coalition space would be overrun within months. "You're bluffing," Krell said. But his voice lacked conviction. "Am I?" Sarah asked. "You never found our shipyards. You never located our supply bases. You never even determined where the raiders were staging from. Your intelligence was completely blind to 98% of our actual military capability. Do you want to bet your civilization that I'm lying about how many ships we have?" She didn't wait for an answer. Instead, she pulled up another display, this one showing tactical analysis of the raids. Every captain who participated in the raids filed reports. "We've analyzed what worked and what didn't. We've identified weaknesses in coalition tactics and defensive patterns. We've mapped out your supply routes and communication networks and political fault lines. If we go to war again, we'll be even more effective because we'll have learned from this experience. And your unified command structure will still have the same fundamental limitations it has right now." "What you describe is unsustainable," Threx protested. "Independent forces without central coordination will eventually collapse into disorder. Commanders will pursue personal agendas. Resources will be wasted through duplication of effort. It's chaos that only works in the short term." "Maybe," Sarah acknowledged. "Or maybe it works because we train for it. Because we build our whole military culture around the idea that individual initiative matters more than obedience. Because we select commanders based on their ability to make good decisions under pressure, not their ability to follow orders. You're right that it could become chaos, but we spend enormous effort making sure it doesn't. And the result is a military that works better scattered than united. Krell understood now. This wasn't just about military tactics. It was about a fundamental difference in philosophy. The coalition saw unity as the highest virtue, the foundation of civilization. Humanity saw independence as essential, something worth fighting for even against impossible odds. The vote will commence, Krell announced. All in favor of accepting humanity's terms and ending hostilities. This time, the vote was different. 846 green lights appeared, but they appeared quickly, without hesitation or debate. The council had learned its lesson. The motion passes, Krell said. Ambassador Chun, your terms are accepted. Humanity will remain independent, and peace will be restored. Sarah bowed slightly. Thank you, High Arbiter. For what it's worth, we hope this can be the beginning of better relations between our peoples. We never wanted to be enemies. We just wanted to be trusted to fight our own way. As she turned to leave, Krell called out one last question. Ambassador, was there ever a moment when you thought we might actually win? Sarah paused, looked back at him. No, she said honestly. You had more ships and better technology and 3,000 years of experience. But you fought as one. We fought as many. And in the end, that made all the difference. She left the chamber, and the council sat in silence. They had learned something that no textbook or simulation could have taught them. They had learned that sometimes the greatest strength comes not from unity, but from trusting individuals to be strong on their own. The galaxy would remember this war, not as the time humanity was crushed by overwhelming force, but as the time 846 species learned to fear what happens when you unite against a species that fights better alone. And every species in the council understood the unspoken message. Humanity had shown mercy by limiting their attacks to military targets and by accepting peace quickly. Next time, if there was a next time, the humans might not be so kind. Next time, 12,000 ships might descend on coalition space like a storm of daggers, each one cutting independently toward total victory. The council had wanted to force humanity into their system. Instead, humanity had taught the entire galaxy a new way to think about war, and that lesson would shape galactic politics for centuries to come.